Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Tony Showala. My pronouns are she and her, and I am the operations lead for RSA US. I'm also joined by two of my incredible colleagues, Claire Byrne and Alexa Clay. On behalf of RSA US and all of our speakers today, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us for today's conversation, Reimagining Libraries, Building Community and Connection for the Future. At the beginning of all of our events, we like to share a little background about the RSA, who we are, and what we do, as well as talk about some ground rules. So founded in the UK, we are the Royal Society for Arts, Manufactures, and Commerce and have been uniting people and ideas to resolve the challenges of our time since 1754. Today, the Society exists as an international fellowship-driven social change organization. We are committed to a world that is resilient, rebalanced, and regenerative, where everyone can reach their full potential. Of the 31,000 fellows around the globe, a bit over 1,200 live and work here in the United States. RSA US exists to coordinate fellowship activities in the States with an aim towards moving the needle on addressing the inequities of our society. Today's event is part of a series of events we're holding to gain understanding, facilitate connections, and amplify the work of folks engaged in the space of social capital, social connections, and and we would encourage you to visit our website if you want to learn more about our work in that space. So in addition to intentionally curating the content of RSA events, we are also always aspiring to show up in ways that facilitate inclusive, safe, authentic, collaborative, respectful, kind spaces that promote learning and support our purpose. To solidify this, please take a moment to look at the things that we have on the screen and ensure that you are in agreement with caring for ourselves and one another in these ways. If needs be, you can chat with either me, Claire, or Alexa directly. Feel free to post questions in the chat window or message any of us as well. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to our moderator, who will then introduce you to our amazing speakers. Shamichael Hallman, who is incredible, is a visionary leader who is redefining the role of libraries in our communities. As the author of Meet Me at the Library and director of Civic Health and Economic Opportunity at the Urban Libraries Council, Shamichael champions libraries as essential city infrastructure, fostering civic engagement, enhancing public safety, and driving economic opportunities for underserved populations. His 2020 TEDx talk, Reimagining the Public Library to Reconnect the Community, has inspired people around the world to see libraries as powerful engines for connection and transformation. Thanks so much for being here, Shamichael. I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks so much, Tony, for having me, and a big thanks to RSA US for hosting this conversation. I just want to say one thing before we begin today's conversation. I want to acknowledge the tragic accident that occurred last night here at Washington National Airport, where I'm currently at. My thoughts, and I know the thoughts of many of us, are with those who were affected, their loved ones, and even the first responders who stepped in such a difficult time. You know, in moments like these, we are reminded of the fragility of life, but also the importance of community. Y'all, we need to come together. We need to be able to support one another. We need to be able to hold space for reflection. And as we begin today's conversation, which really is all about connection and belonging, I invite us to just take a brief moment of silence to honor those who were impacted. Thank you. Um, it's a privilege to welcome you to this important conversation about the evolving role of libraries in strengthening communities, relationships, and even democracy. I wrote Meet Me at the Library because I've witnessed firsthand how libraries are more than just spaces filled with books. They are essential civic infrastructure, serving as gathering places where ideas, relationships, and community are formed. At a time when trust in institutions is eroding and polarization is deepening, Libraries remain one of the few spaces where people from all walks of life can come together. My book is a way of shining a light on the innovative bridge building work happening at libraries across the country and the leaders who are making it happen. I'm honored to be joined today by an incredible group of panelists, each of whom have played a role in shaping conversations that unfolded in my book. These are people that I respect deeply, not just for their professional expertise, but because of their unwavering commitment to reimagining what libraries can be. Jennie Garner is the director of the North Liberty Library in Iowa, where she has worked for over 25 years in various roles. Jennie is a national leader in community engagement, inclusive policy development, and positive leadership. As a president of the past president of the Association for Rural and Small Libraries, she has championed advocacy efforts that bridge the gap between libraries of all sizes. Her work really embodies the belief that libraries should be engaged in their communities and in their collections. Uh, Daphna Blatt is the New York Public Library's Senior Director of Strategy and Public Impact. She works across NYPL and with external stakeholders to maximize the library's civic impact, ensuring that libraries remain responsive to community needs. With a background in strategic consulting and psychology, Daphna is passionate about guiding organizations through change and reinforcing libraries' role as vital civic spaces. She is a true evangelist for the magic of public libraries and the role they play in our democracy. Ena Esco is a veteran radio professional, producer, and podcaster with more than 20 years of experience in media. She is the creator of the Verbally Effective podcast, a platform that amplifies the cultural landscape in Memphis, Tennessee, through in-depth interviews. As the groundbreaking innovator in residence at the Cosset Library as a part of the Memphis Public Libraries, Ena has led groundbreaking podcast programming initiatives, helping libraries expand into new forms of storytelling and engagement. Her work was recently recognized by the Urban Libraries Council for its impact on media and community connection. We have a rich discussion planned today, structured around three key themes that reflect both the work of our panelists and some of the core ideas in my book. In segment one, we'll talk about libraries and well-being. We'll begin by exploring how libraries support well-being and flourishing, drawing on Daphna's expertise in strategy and impact measurement. She'll discuss insights from NYPL's Libraries and Well-Being Report. And we'll hear from Jennie about how these ideas translate into everyday library experiences, particularly in rural and small libraries. In segment two, we'll talk about meaning and accomplishment in libraries. We will shift the conversation to libraries, how libraries serve as places for personal meaning and accomplishment. This work at Cosset Library is a great example of this, and displays how innovative programs like podcasting and digital media initiatives empower places to create, connect, and grow. We'll also discuss how libraries foster civic engagement alongside personal achievement. And in the last segment, we'll talk about innovation in public libraries. We'll talk about how they evolve to meet community needs and leverage new tools to empower patrons. From high-tech resources at libraries to creative programming, we'll highlight how libraries continue to be catalysts for transformation. After the discussion, we'll open the floor for questions and discussions, allowing you to engage directly with our panelists. And I hope that you will do that. And ultimately, we hope that today's conversation about libraries shifts the perspective and talks about the future of libraries. So with that, let's dive in. Daphna, thank you again so much for being here. You have been such a pivotal part of my understanding of libraries and play such a pivotal role in how this book was shaped. Last year, you were a part of a team that released a report highlighting the role of libraries and creating the preconditions for flourishing. Can you expand on the idea of PERMA and how libraries provide calm, safety, and peace to support well-being?
Sure, and thank you I'm honored to be here today with all of you. So the report that my team and I released is really the first fruit of a 1.5 year long marriage or bridge building between the worlds of public libraries and positive psychology. PERMA is a framework within positive psychology that essentially positive psychologists would argue if you have these 5 elements in your life as an individual or as a community, you are experiencing well-being. So what are those 5 elements? The P in PERMA is positive emotion. The E is engagement. The R is relationships. The M is meaning. And the A is accomplishment. And what we decided to do was to engage our patrons in a survey and in a series of focus groups to understand if they see a relationship between their library usage and these elements, these perma elements in their lives. And we were really heartened, not surprised, but heartened to see that the answer was overwhelmingly yes. So in terms of answering structured questions about measures of these elements of well-being, the responses were really, really strong. Respondents told us that the library definitely has a positive effect on these elements of well-being across all of these dimensions of PERMA. And then in more open-ended conversation with our patrons, both in free text responses to the survey and in focus groups, our patrons kind of opened up and helped us understand that not only do libraries actually foster those core elements of well-being, they do two other things on top of that. First of all, they create a foundation for well-being so that those perma elements can be experienced. And they do that by creating feelings of stability, safety, calm, refuge. That allows for those perma elements to be experienced. And then on top of the perma, they actually foster personal development beyond well-being, so lasting growth and change.
I want to dive a little bit more into to PERMA. You discussed one of these elements as positive emotions, and that's kind of a key element to PERMA. How do libraries evoke these emotions for patrons?
Right. So first of all, this is really interesting. A known measure of well-being is how positively you feel about yourself. That is often used in the field of positive psychology to get a sense of people's degree of subjective well-being and flourishing. When we asked our patrons whether the library positively impacts their sense of how positively they feel about themselves, 77% of respondents said yes. So that's one thing, sort of helping bolster people's self-concept. But positive emotions that are also fostered by library use include a sense of comfort and also a sense of joy. And that joy comes through connection to library resources like collection materials and also to other members of the community, both staff and patrons.
Mm. And you also talk about engagement in relationships. Can you give us some examples of maybe a story from your research that illustrates how libraries foster these connections?
Yeah, so I'll give you some numbers first, and then we can talk a little bit more about the qualitative elements of impact that our patrons shared with us. So first of all, we asked in a structured survey question, does using the library actually have a positive effect on how connected you feel to others and how much empathy you feel towards others who may be different from you? And in those two cases, 72% and 76% of respondents said, yes, the library does positively impact those things. We even used a well-being measure of, do you feel that there are people in your life who really care about you? And 60% of library patrons actually said that their library usage supports that feeling. So 60% is not 100%, but the fact that 60% of library patrons attribute the library to a sense that there are people in their lives who really care about them, I'm incredibly moved by that finding. And then in more open-ended discourse with our patrons, we understood that part of what was happening in this relationship part of PERMA is this spectrum of connection, care, and support that people see as part of their library experience. So that connection is everything from just being in the same room as other people and kind of engaging in parallel play, even if you never interact, but we're all just working together. There's a connection and an inspiration to that, all the way to making, lifelong, very close friendships, a sense of connection to place, to community, to other people, and to the world.
That's fascinating. Thanks so much. Jennie, I want to bring you into this conversation. From your experience, how do these principles, particularly as we think about positive emotions, engagement, relationship, how does this come to life at your library?
Yeah, I think so. I'm gonna apologize. I'm fighting a cold right now, everyone. So excuse my rasp. we really work from the inside out at our library to build a culture of trust in the workplace that naturally and organically sort of flows out into the work that we do with our patrons every day. And by the nature of our work in libraries, we know that we extend trust to our patrons when they walk through our doors, right? When people come in the library, they're offered one of the last free spaces in society where they can go and just be. They can explore, they can create, they have opportunities for self-expression. So when we provide access to information and we give people space to learn and to work together and issue library cards that open a world of possibilities to folks in our communities, and at our library, we work really hard to do all these things with no barriers. So when someone asks for a library card at our library, we don't ask for identification. We simply ask them to give us their name and where they live, and we get them a library card. And they take things home, right? So they're immediately trusted. Where else in society do we have those feelings? And that literally creates a chemical reaction for folks. Those happy chemicals that we have, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, start to build up, and people flourish when those feelings are happening within, as Daphna, spoke about. And then in turn, we feel that trust reciprocated back to us. So patrons come in knowing that it's a safe space for them to be where they can belong. We use a service model that embeds inclusion, equity, and access into everything, beginning with our strategic plan and our policies, and then all the way out into how the library operations flow. And provide all levels of staff the latitude to do the work. They have the decision-making power at the desk to make a decision to help the patrons and reach the answer yes, to make the connections that they need to make with other people in our community that might better serve the question or the need that arise, and create a positive experience for everyone who walks in the doors. I remind our staff pretty regularly that we don't know what people carry in their bags when they come in, and we might be the only positive experience they have. So we want to make it absolutely the best experience and to meet the needs that they have. And we work to say yes and connect people with the resources that they have. For example, we have a new equity coordinator within the city, and she came to meet with me a couple of weeks ago, and she said, "I am astonished that your staff knows everyone's names. When they walk in, your staff knows almost everybody. At our senior dining, one of our staff members who greets all the seniors, and they adore her. She said Corey knew the name of all 43 attendees at the event. And she greeted them. She knew something about their lives. So that's the relationship building piece that Daphna spoke about.
Yeah, that's incredible. Jennie, I think people, once hearing maybe a day in the life of your library, or maybe the week or a month in the life of your library, might be very challenged about what their assumptions are about what a library is. Can you tell us a bit more about your work and the things that happen at your library?
Sure. Well, we're very community facing, and the staff is out in the community a lot of the time. The magic doesn't just happen in the library; it actually happens outside the library community and out in the public. We go to the food pantry. We go to the schools every week. We have our family services librarian is doing over 7 outreaches a week in the community at daycares. We're a small team, but we're mighty. I think sometimes we find ourselves scrambling in the library to find out who's left in the building doing the work here because we're out so much in the community. Our team is absolutely amazing, and they're incredibly flexible. They're willing to change their schedules to meet the needs of the programming that they're doing. In any given week, I get a message from somebody saying, "Hey, I have to do a split shift today because I'm going to do a program tonight," or whatever. We trust them to do that work, and in turn, that trust flows outward. Like I said, we run our summer lunch program in the city. That program was threatening with being discontinued because the person who was running it wasn't able to continue, and our staff asked if they could step up and take it on. And I just asked them to make sure they had the capacity to do that work. We provide activities or find volunteers to do activities every day of the week, all summer long during that lunch program. It's free summer lunch for anyone. They don't have to prove that they need lunch. They just come. And starts with the kids, and if there's leftovers, the adults are also then provided a meal. Our local restaurants are involved, so there's partnerships in every direction. Different people filling that role every day at the summer lunch, helping serve. It's not just library staff; it's really a community effort. 300, we provide snack programs 365 days well, every day of the week, 7 days a week, all year long for kiddos at 4 o'clock. They know it's snack time, so they start asking about too. So they know that it's coming, they know it's here. And then, like I mentioned, we do senior dining. So we're not just libraries. It's not just about books here. Like I was at a recent library that I visited. One of their tagline was, "It begins with books." And I think that that's very, very true. We run our Junior Optimist Club through the library. So our Optimist Club came to us and asked if we could help get that program launched. So they've we have the middle graders, and then they've just now expanded to a high school Junior Optimist Club. So helping kids learn civic engagement and how to do that work is really important for us as well. And providing opportunities for people to model civil discourse, combating loneliness every day, providing programming for people just to come in and be and connect with one another and celebrate community and make art, all the things.
That's incredible. Thanks so much for sharing, Jennie. I feel like every time you and I talk, I learn something else about the work that you all are doing, and I just feel like all of you are wearing capes at that library. I want to bring Ena into the conversation. Ena, as Jennie mentioned, libraries often create spaces for connection and engagement. And as we think about meaning and accomplishment, let's explore how libraries help people find meaning and achievement. Your work at Cosset Library is a perfect example of that. Can you sort of walk us through the innovator in residence model that you're employing at Memphis Library, kind of what you're working on, and how you think this initiative in particular brings a sense of meaning to the lives of patrons who participate in it?
Yes, so I am actually the innovator in residence in Memphis at CASA, teaching people all the ins and outs about podcasting. And when you think of podcasting, of course, you think of telling stories. People come to the library to get books, but now we can actually sit there and learn how to actually make a product that can actually be marketed and sold as an individual, right? So a lot of people are passionate about a lot of topics. So what I do with the programming through the Innovator in Residence program, I teach people how to frame their ideas, how to actually decide on a format for their podcast, how to actually execute their podcast, how to tell a story, right? Also, we talk about marketing your podcast. In this age of social media, everything is digital. How do you connect with an audience? Who is your target audience? We talk about monetization. Everyone wants to know how they can make some money off of their product as well. So a lot of times, I get patrons that come, they don't know each other. We get into the workshop and we actually start to have these conversations, and everyone finds that everyone has something in common, right? And they all have this goal of learning this information about starting a podcast. So in a sense, we are definitely building community and connecting in these workshops. And it comes to a point where people are teaching each other, helping each other out, with their specific skill set they have. But the Innovator in Residence program for podcast programming at CASA, it teaches patrons marketable skills. It builds their business acumen. I've had podcasters to actually create a podcast show, and at the end of the day, they are now on radio here in the city of Memphis. So the possibilities are endless.
Yeah, that's incredible. And talk a little bit more about this. Like, how do you see patrons achieving this sense of accomplishment through the resources and programs you develop? I mean, clearly you've talked about, people going on to bigger and brighter things. You've talked about, folks learning new skills for the first time, trying something out for the first time. But how else do you see people really achieving this sense of accomplishment?
Wow. So let me just take an example of two young ladies that, sent me an email to learn about the podcasting residency. Their names are Ashling and Tiffany, and they are both podcasts. Well, they both have businesses in the travel industry, right? So they joined forces together and they wanted to create a travel podcast. And they actually set up a schedule where they can come inside of the podcast studio that we have with all of the equipment that's needed, the roadcaster, which we'll talk about very shortly. And they created an entire trailer for their podcast, a season one, and they released their product, right? It was so huge that they created like a byproduct of the initial podcast that can be monetized, right? So if you want more in-depth information about how to use your credit, your points from your credit cards, come to, got points point two to get more information at this particular price. So these patrons are actually building a product. And Tiffany and Ashling are very passionate about the travel industry. So it's just amazing to see patrons actually come and do the work, commit themselves, learn how to do it, and actually, create a whole new stream of income for themselves.
That's incredible. And so you talked just kind of a lot about sort of the individual accomplishment, but can you speak to how libraries like yours, in particular, the work you're doing at CASA, how it balances individual accomplishment with like a broader community impact?
Wow. So as I mentioned, oftentimes when we have these workshops, you definitely can sense that we are building community in these particular meetings that we have. And in itself, Casa Library is a historic library here in the city of Memphis. It is the first integrated library. When you walk in the building, you're actually looking at a mural from protests that happened back in the 60s to actually integrate the library. So when you walk into the building, you already have a sense of, something amazing happened here to connect people, right? So we're in the heart of downtown Memphis. So you get patrons from all over that may come and commune. It's a lot of businesses in the downtown area of Memphis. They may come and have lunch at the restaurant there. So we are definitely connected with the community on a much broader scale because people often come to the workshops and know the history of that library. And, it's just a sense of mobilization, especially at a time right now when so many things are going on and people have a lot on their mind and they're ready to elevate their voices. And they know that at CASID, it's a safe space to do that.
That's incredible. Kind of maybe one last thing that I'm hearing from you, how people are achieving personal goals and how they are, maybe meeting folks that they wouldn't have met otherwise. This idea of the library and the programming of the library as a way of fostering civic connections, maybe helping people tell stories to people from the other side of the community or other side of the tracks. How do you see the library as a kind of a microcosm of a larger societal change?
Wow, the type of guests that may come through the Innovator in Residence program, it varies, right? We'll have the mayor of Memphis, Mayor Paul Young, come and do a live podcast in front of the patrons, which, you don't oftentimes just see the mayor any day, right? You may have, different experts in different industries that relate to podcasting that will come to some of our community events for podcasters. So I may have a person that is a lawyer that specializes in artificial intelligence, teaching the podcasters how to protect their intellectual property, right? Learning about artificial intelligence. We have podcast festivals. We actually, this past year, we had actress, podcaster, entrepreneur Amanda Seals as the keynote speaker. And this is free to the public, right? So everyone was like, I don't have to pay anything to come to the festival. I'm like, no. So, we often say free to you, but not free to do, right? So, of course, I want to shout out the Memphis Library Foundation for even making this type of programming possible, because people are very passionate right now about elevating their voices. So I have been extremely busy. So I have a Rolodex of media personalities, people that can help them tell their stories, award-winning podcasters. Shout out to Dominic Lawson. He's actually won a Webby award for his podcast here in Memphis, Black is America podcast. So you never know who's coming through the podcast programming at Casa Library, and people feel empowered when they can sit and talk and learn from these individuals.
Yeah, that bumping up against each other, right? That
Yes.
library as a site of encounter, as a space where you're just gonna there's a huge probability that you're gonna see somebody that you wouldn't see otherwise is really an amazing thing. And I love this concept, and this is probably an entirely different conversation, but the free to you but not free to do is
Yes,
such a it's
big
such
shout
a
outs to Christine Weinrich with the
it's
Memphis
such,
Library Foundation. That is her favorite quote.
wow, such an amazing idea, and particularly as we think about the future of funding for libraries is such an important conversation. Daphne, I want to get you back in this conversation. We've been talking about innovation, and certainly, I think a lot of people might be surprised to hear that you can go to a library and record a podcast and have access to the same level of equipment that professional podcasters have. Um, Libraries are not only about fostering well-being or providing opportunities for meeting and accomplishment, but they are also hubs for innovation. And whether that's through programming that we've seen, or access to equipment, or simply understanding and meeting the evolving needs of the community, libraries really are reshaping how we think about public spaces and resources. Daphna, your report mentions that libraries enable individual growth and lasting personal change, helping patrons expand their worlds. How does this connect to the innovative programming and resources the library offers?
Yeah. Well, first of all, let's ground in some of the data points from our research around that. So 88% of the patrons that we surveyed told us that the library supports their personal growth. So not just their professional goals or their educational goals, but their growth as individuals. And when we gave them the chance to kind of share more about that with us, our patrons told us that the library helps them expand their boundaries in all kinds of ways. It helps them see the world through other people's eyes in more depth and with broader perspective. It makes them aware of the largeness of the world around them. It opened doors for them, both around them and then also within themselves. So that's already amazing. Now, in terms of innovation, of course, our innovation with our collections and innovation through programs, which just came up in this conversation, that's such a big part of it. But I actually want to make a plug for core library infrastructure as also being innovative. And what do I mean by that? Part of what our patrons told us in terms of how the library supports their growth is that it's actually the space itself as a place for reflection and introspection, a place again of calm and stability that our patrons told us they turn to at particular moments of transition in their lives. The library is the place that they can go to just kind of take an inhale and an exhale, take stock of where they are, and really kind of figure out the trajectory from where they are to where they want to be. And innovation is such a big part of that story, but it's sitting side by side with core library infrastructure. The very fact that we offer that space for people and that that space has certain attributes of welcoming, accessibility, a certain environment, let's not lose that value as we think about the new things that we can do. Those things exist side by side.
Thanks for adding that element. I think it's really, really important to think about those sort of, sometimes even the unseen things, right? The things that we feel but we may not see when we walk into the library space. And from your research, what examples of library innovation stood out as particularly impactful in helping patrons see themselves in the world differently?
Yeah. So again, I'm going to make a plug for thinking about innovation kind of upside down, and in more of this object relations kind of way. So essentially anything that libraries do that allow patrons and community members who don't necessarily use the library to kind of influence the way that they see themselves, the way they see their connections to their community members, and the way that they see their connection to society. What Jennie was talking about before in terms of, the trust that is actually bi-directional, that happens in programming in innovative ways. It happens with innovative ways of delivering services and collections, but it's also happening at this very granular level between people and between in these modeling of interactions every day, in the way people are greeted, in the way they're treated. that is part of what lets people kind of connect to longer term and lasting growth.
Thanks. I want to come back to you for a moment because you talked about some really, powerful, very, I would imagine, expensive equipment that is available to patrons to be able to record podcasts. Can you tell us about some of the equipment that is actually available for patrons to be able to have access to? And how has access to these resources empowered patrons in maybe an unexpected way?
Yes, so we have what we would call like the belle of the ball for podcast equipment, an all-in-one studio called Rodecaster Pro, right? So this is an all-in-one system that is inside our podcast studio. So just imagine, very similar to a mini radio studio. You have your board, you have your microphones, you have your headphones. So this equipment gives that quality sound, right? Rodecaster is one of the number one manufacturers in this industry. So when people actually get to the point after they've stopped overthinking and I push them to that level, because we actually have like true therapy sessions to sometimes get them to start recording. A lot of people have just insecurities about maybe how they sound. Oh, my voice doesn't sound great. And I hear that so often. I know that it's just an excuse or an insecurity, right? So I do a little trick. I always get them to actually get on the equipment and read something that I have, right? And after that person hears themselves, they are immediately empowered to record again. So I am actually watching a transformation in my face. And it makes them feel better. Oh, I thought I didn't sound like that. Okay, yeah, because this is the first time you're hearing yourself back. So, and it's just the quality of the Rodecaster in itself as well. It's so clear and crisp, because this was specifically made for podcasters. Because in its truest form, podcasting is auditory, it's audio. We see a lot of people on YouTube saying they're podcasters, but of course, we want to get that visual piece as well. But at its truest form, podcasting is auditory.
And you've shared a couple of stories already of people who just transformed their lives. But are there any other stories that stick out as you think about this program in particular?
Well, I would say, just to kind of piggyback on people listening back to themselves, we just actually had a podcast boot camp this past Saturday at CASA, which is like an all-inclusive workshop, really at a high level, talking about your idea, giving them a format. But at the end, we do an exercise where we actually do a narrative storytelling exercise to create their intros. So we kind of we create the framework for them, but we have them present their intros on the Rodecaster, and just to see people witness them do it, to let them hear themselves back, is transformative, right? But another story, back to Ashling and Tiffany, who have their travel podcast, Got Points, right? They were so familiar with the equipment, completed season one, and I really admired those young ladies for putting the time in to create such an amazing product. And I asked them prior to our last podcast festival, I was like, are you ladies interested in being a presenter for the festival? I said, I think you ladies would be amazing at doing a session called Starting a Podcast in 30 Days, because that's really what they did. And I watched them do it and get results. And they agreed. And, this was just amazing because they came out of the residency. They've never presented at a festival or conference before, but those ladies kicked off the festival and they were absolutely amazing. And one of them actually emailed me and told me that they've been booked for another conference, like for a conference in the travel industry. And it was that podcast festival that gave them the push or confidence to do something of that nature. So it's so many stories, Shamichael. I could go on and on.
That's incredible. That is
Yeah.
incredible. What access to the space, what access to the equipment, and then what access to someone like yourself, who is a professional, kind of what that can do in their life. Jennie, I want to kind of bring you in as we wrap this conversation up. At your library, you've been developing innovative programs to bring people together who might not otherwise connect. Can you share how this programming is rooted in understanding community needs?
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of flipped a switch back. When I started as director, one of the things I noted was that we'd been going into the community and saying, "Here's, look at all the cool things we have to offer you." And we flipped that to asking the script to asking, "What can we do for you? What do you need from the library when we were out and about?" So first, I think staff visibility. So we're out in the community a lot. All levels of staff have the ability to volunteer and be part of the community in different ways, and they're paid for their time to do that work. So they're on boards. They're serving on boards of agencies that we wouldn't otherwise have access to. That we might not think of it right away as a partner agency. They're getting out, and our staff is on school boards, or not school boards, but on like the PTOs and things like that. And they're using their library hat in those as well. They're there because they're parents, but also they're community members, and they remember that the library is really important. And we talk to our bridge partners. So we call our community partners that can access groups that we may not otherwise meet, our bridge partners, and we talk to them a lot and ask them to help us not only with programming, but to help us reach maybe our underserved communities. And then research, just reading and delving into the needs of what we have. So we've created a lot of just very, I think, unique programs, but also just chances for people to come together. I mean, we've had a morning coffee forever and ever, probably 15 years or more. And that coffee, sometimes we have 25 people sitting around drinking coffee and talking in our magazine room. They don't like to be put into the meeting rooms. They like to be out. They're very loud, and it's fine. We're a loud library, so.
And maybe kind of a final question there, and this kind of ties into what you just said. Like, how do you see these programs influence the way that people start to view the library? Like, does it transform how they think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, I'll give an example, and it's kind of we just sent out our fundraising letter, which we do every year. And I've gotten more people that I don't know and haven't contributed in the past, contributing this year and faster. Our fundraising is coming in really quickly. So it's pretty amazing to see. But also, if you bear with me, I'll share a couple of quotes. We have a Good Neighbor book club. It's a book club where we read a little bit tougher topics. It was a 6-week series that started last year, and we had 16 people who attended, and they came to every one. So having 16 people stay and no attrition is pretty amazing. And then they said we were going to take a break, and they were like, "No, we want to do another one right now." So we started a second one, and 8 of the 16 came again, and then we have 7 new joining. And of those, we've got 3 who have volunteered to help continue it and see what it will look like. And I asked Nick, our adult services person, to give me a couple of quotes from that. And one of the things first of all, somebody expressed that they reached out to a family member that they hadn't spoken to since 2020, spurred by the book club. And I thought that was amazing. And one of them said, the foundation of ideas and discussion offered by the book groups has enabled me to open discussions with friends and family that might not otherwise have happened. I've always believed the library can play a vital role as a hub of the community, and my experience has been exactly that. And then someone else said, "Thanks for all the hard work you, your staff, and the facilitators are doing to connect our community. I joined the Good Neighbor Book Club first because I was hoping to meet people who are also interested in turning down the shouting and negativity that's coming from the current mood in the country. I found that and so much more, getting to discuss how to broaden our perspectives on information gatherings and things that motivate people. I've learned more about myself and how others are feeling in North Liberty, the state, and our country."
That's incredible. Thanks so much for sharing that, Jennie. That's a really powerful way for us to bring things to a close. I want to thank you and Ena and Daphna for sharing your thoughts. And with that, Tony, I want to turn it back over to you for Q&A.
All right. Thank you so much, Shamichael. Oh my goodness. I don't know about all of you, but between the chat and just my own experiences, I just feel so much warmer and happier having talked with or having heard from you all about libraries and hearing about all of the ways that you're engaging folks and creating spaces and just like the connections. That you all have been talking about, Daphna, like with the physical space and that space, like Alexa posted a question in the chat at one point, encouraging folks to like share some of our library experiences. And I was having a hard time to even like put it into words because it was so like my experience at libraries is so visceral, and like libraries were such a significant experience for me growing up, that just like the thought of it just makes me happy. And it's like almost a little bit of kind of like a home away from home in some ways, because it's a space where I can go and just feel comfortable. And like it was just such an incredible and important part of my life. So just wanted to share all of that. I was like, all these thoughts and feelings have been bubbling up as you all have been talking. A few questions came in, and lots of thoughts, lots of ideas. Everybody wants to be in Memphis. Everybody wants to be in North Liberty. Everybody wants to be in New York, just because of the amazing things that you all are doing. Michelle had a question. Michelle, do you want to come off mute and ask your question? I'm happy to ask it for you, but there might be some more context that you would want to share with folks. I'm finding amongst the folks. You're still here.
I'm very cold.
Oh.
So I know I look funny. This has been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much to all the panelists and those of you who have been contributing to the chat. Um, I am based in North Carolina, and I am looking at policies. I've attended a library board of trustees meeting to make sure that I am compliant as a member of the general public if I wanted to suggest activities to be held at the library. But I have seen, and they're not specifically at the library that I want to partner with or collaborate with, but I've seen in other library policies across the country about events. I think different, that can't have any kind of political stance. No, nothing about money, nothing about parties, nothing. So when Ena, and I hope I'm pronouncing your first name correctly. So when you were talking about creating an opportunity for people to earn income or generate income, I just was wondering if you had to navigate or speak with people in the leadership, or even your trustees, about policies in the building, having those kinds of meetings. Thank you so much.
Oh, wow. Well, you do know, okay, so as you mentioned, we are in a city-owned building, right? So CASID is owned by the city of Memphis. So you do have to have certain decorum when it comes to the activities you are doing. I remember when we had the podcast festival, for example. I have not, to answer your question, I have not had to talk to any policymakers or anything. They've given me carte blanche on programming. So, but I did learn that there are some politics involved when we had our podcast festival. I'm not sure if you know this or not, but Amanda Seals is a very outspoken individual, right? She is a creator that talks about content that may hit on, the war with Palestine, and her passion for those type of subjects, even with the current administration, right? So she did speak a little to that. And at the festival, when, you know, some of the guests were engaging with her, but they asked her about it, right? So she answered the question. And I remember after the festival, after speaking to some of leadership, they say we may, because the news station was present at the festival, we may have to smooth some things over, because that content was spoken about by our guests. But we didn't have any issues. But I did not know that it was that deep, because remember, I'm an innovator. I don't know that part of the politics with libraries, maybe. Am I saying that right, Shamichael? Like, I didn't know that it could get that political.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, Michelle. In my role at the Urban Libraries Council, each year we do an innovations initiative, and it's spread across a number of categories. And one of those categories is in economic opportunity and workforce development. And if you click on that link, you'll see, I think, over 100 ways in which public libraries do all sorts of things around entrepreneurship, helping people start food-based businesses, helping creative entrepreneurs who are doing hats, t-shirts, jewelry, soap. Like, there's all sorts of really interesting things that are there, and you might find some information there on like how some of those libraries are doing that. But I think as you talk about, like, hey, like, these are programs that are going to empower people. that are going to equip people to launch businesses in their community, to upskill themselves, right? These are things that generally resonate across political ideology.
And I'll just hop on and add, here we've started to some of the programming we have actually will reach some of the folks you're talking about. We have our public services librarian has a private sector past, so she has taken the role of getting an entrepreneurship librarian certification, and has been doing small business programming for the last several months, and it's picked up a new audience for sure, and it's helped us. To also advocate. They that advocate and share, and that's where I'm talking about when she goes, she's going to events that where she's introducing herself as a librarian and then sharing what we have to offer at the library for businesses.
Thank you all so much for all of those great ways to think about and explore the spaces. I see Dibia Dream. I see your hand raised. Would love to hear from you.
Well, thank you all for this. This is amazing just to hear how different things are happening with libraries, because I think that the spaces that we have, they're large spaces, right? And they're not really activated. And so you're starting to see, we probably all had encyclopedias, but kids don't even understand what these are, right? And so we're trying to actively get them back into libraries. And something cool that we do, we're a nonprofit that sparks social change through STEM and recreational education. And so we have a program called STEM Saturdays where we do STEM with the kids on the weekend. So they'll build mechanical lungs, solar rovers, rockets, but we'll partner with libraries. So we're trying to actively bring kids back into the library, have them understand how the system works in the library. And then also, too, we do something cool with a group called Cyber Seniors, where we're teaching more mature adults how to not be afraid of technology. So I think this chat is very timely for some of the stuff that we're doing. And if there's also any additional ideas you all may have of bringing people back to the library, since that space is there, right? Libraries aren't going anywhere, but it's how to transform them into innovative spaces. That would be great.
Thanks so much for those questions, Brandon. Yes, I Googled you.
Yeah, Brandon, it sounds like a really an incredible program just from what I'm hearing. We know that those skills are going to be more and more crucial as we move into an economy that is innovation based. That is skilled. That sort of skill is necessary. And from my experience, and Jennie, Daphna, would love for y'all to hop in. Libraries are always pretty excited to partner with community organizations, particularly where there is some synergy, right? Where there is a shared value. And that idea of lifelong learning, from cradle to end of life, libraries embody that. And I think what you might find actually, right, and you probably already noticed this, that as you host things in the library, not only is there space that is available there, but often a lot of the collection, might be able to be used. There may be books and magazines that are freely available that you can incorporate into your curriculum, right? And even as kids depart from your program and you want to keep them engaged, like, hey, get a library card and grab this book that's going to help you continue to think about this, right? Or grab this magazine that's going to help you continue to think about this. And then I would say, lastly, you look at some of the stuff that's happening with Ena and CASET, libraries are even more and more moving to this transforming underutilized space into maker spaces. Where it may be, a meeting room that wasn't really being used very heavily, or just a part of the library that's not being used heavily. And so you may start looking, very sort of intentionally at libraries who already have those spaces, or who are looking to maybe create those spaces and don't have the resources. And you have some of those resources, could make for really an amazing partnership.
Yes, I just want to piggyback real quick off of you, Shamichael, talking about the spaces and the gentleman who just spoke about connecting with the youth. I've actually partnered with the Boys and Girls Club of America. They bring the kids to the podcasting studio every summer so they can have a safe space to talk about the topics that they want to talk about. Because we're always trying to get our youth to open up. Like, I have two sons myself, a 19-year-old and 11-year-old. Sometimes it's like pulling teeth, but if you get someone else, I think in front of them that can have some skills to pull things out of them, they feel safe to talk. So we definitely love to connect with different organizations in the city of Memphis, especially with the youth, to have them elevate their voices.
Thanks, Ena. We probably have time for just one more question. Ivory, I see your hand raised, so would love to hear from you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So first, I'm really grateful to be at this webinar and just hear how libraries are connecting in wellness. I want to bring the term social prescribing into the room for, it's a relatively new term in the US, but, kind of linking people with social groups and meaningful activities to impact their wellness. I really believe that libraries are a great partner in that work. So just wanted to bring that in. But the question I have is, I've worked in home health with people that are homebound for the last 9 years. And when we talk about loneliness, when we talk about community programming in the library, often those people are not able to attend. And I'm just curious if anyone has examples in libraries they know of that have done outreach to their homebound to engage them in libraries and well-being programs. That's kind of a passion of mine.
I can start jumping in. The New York Public Library systems, not just NYPL, but also Queens and Brooklyn, which, believe it or not, are actually different library systems, all have programs that actually focus on homebound New Yorkers and have programs that connect them virtually to each other. And that has been going on for decades and decades, to the point where it started with just phone calls, and really beautiful, moving testimony from participants about how that's their lifeline to the world outside. And also how the collections, and this even came up in the survey that we ran, how the collections coming to their homes, because we do have services that actually deliver to particular populations, that sort of opens a window to the world and keeps those patrons engaged. So I'm sure there are examples of libraries across the country who are doing really wonderful things to get resources to people who can't actually come in person.
Yeah, Ivory, I want to thank you for introducing that definition to the conversation. I had not heard that before, and I think it's very incredible. I do in my book, I was actually thinking about that as well and trying to understand, what libraries were doing that. And one of the libraries that I came across that I think is doing a phenomenal job is the Cambridge Public Library in Massachusetts. I put a link there. You can see a little bit of that, some of the things they do there. But I think they offer a really great model of, particularly for urban libraries, of ways to engage with seniors in multiple ways.
All right, everyone. Well, I know we are at time. We're actually a minute over. So thank you all so much for hanging in there with us. It has been such a lovely conversation with all of you. Shamichael, Ena, Jennie, Daphna, it's been so lovely to have you join us. Thank you for being part of this. Thank you for what you do every day in creating connection and hope within your communities. And we are looking forward to learning more about your work and continuing to support you in whatever ways we can. Thank you all so much for joining us. A recording of today's event will be available on our YouTube within a few days. And if you're interested more in our work at the RSA, please visit our website. And with that, I'll wish you all a wonderful rest of your day. Bye, everyone.